I've counted men for 15 seasons, and I have never lost one. I want that on the record before anything else, because everything I'm about to tell you turns on it. Not lost as in dead. I've had men hurt. One bad enough that he doesn't work fire anymore. Lost as in unaccounted for. Lost as in a name I called into the radio and didn't get an answer to. In 15 years, that has never once happened to me. And there are bosses out here with 20 years who can't say the same. It's the one thing I'm known for. When they put a green squad boss under someone, they put him under me. Because whatever else goes wrong on my piece of the line, the count comes back clean. The count is the whole job. People think firefighting is water and sauce and standing in front of a wall of orange being brave. It isn't. Mostly it's spacing men out along a line you've cut into the dirt, and knowing, every minute of every hour, exactly where all of them are. Because the fire doesn't kill you by burning you. It kills you by getting behind you while you're looking the wrong way. And the only thing standing between that and a funeral is a man who knows how many people he brought up the hill and refuses to come down with fewer. We call it a PAR, Personnel Accountability Report. You hear it on the radio 100 times a shift, and after a while you stop hearing it the way a civilian would. Somebody keys up and says, "Give me a PAR," and every squad boss counts his people and reports a number, and the numbers add up to the number that walked in, and everybody keeps working. That's it. That's the ritual. It sounds like nothing. It's the most important sentence in my whole life, and I say it the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt. 11. That was my crew. Me and 10. I need you to hold on to that, because I held on to it for a long time. Longer than I should have. 11. 2 squads. My name and 10 others I could recite in my sleep, in the order they signed the line that morning, in the order I'd pull them out if it came to that. I knew their boots. I knew which one favored his left knee going downhill, and which one talked too much on the net, and which one you had to check on because he'd never tell you he was gassed. 10 men. I'm the 11th. You don't forget the size of your own family. The mountain that morning was the kind you don't remember afterward because it looked like every other one. Ridge running roughly north, the fire working up the far side toward us. Our job to hold a line along the top so it couldn't crest and run down into the drainage behind us where there were houses. Standard. The kind of assignment you've done so many times your body does it without asking your brain for permission. Cool air still in the low spots when we hiked in. Smoke laying flat in the valley, which is how you like it. Smoke that lays down is smoke that isn't moving fast. We started cutting line a little after 7. The first PAR of the day is a formality. You've just walked in together. You can practically still feel everybody. Nobody's had time to wander. Division called for it around 8. The way they do at the top of the operational period give me a PAR. All divisions. And it went around the net, squad by squad, boss by boss, and it came to me, and I looked down my line. I want to be careful here, because this is the part I've gone over more times than any other, and I don't trust my own version of it anymore. But at the time, at 8 in the morning with the coffee still in me, here is what happened. I keyed up, and I counted. I counted the way I always count, which is not by pointing. It's by touching each man in my head one at a time, his position, his name, his acknowledgement coming back. And the number I reported was 12. I said 12. And then I let go of the key, and I sat there for a second with my thumb still on the plastic because 12 is not my number. Now, I want to tell you I stopped everything right then. I didn't. Because here is what 15 seasons does to you. It makes you assume the mistake is small and yours and boring. Radios double. 2 men key up at the same instant, and the net stacks their voices, and you count one acknowledgement as 2. Or, you're tired, and you count your own self twice, once as the boss and once as a body. Or you just miscount, the way anyone counting fast under a helmet in the noise miscounts, and 12 was a slip of the tongue, and nobody on the whole fire even noticed, because the division's total still came out right somehow, or nobody was listening that hard, or it just washed away in the traffic. That's what I told myself. A slip. I'd been counting men for 15 years. I was allowed one wrong number in 15 years. So I did the thing I always do when a count feels soft. I counted again off the radio with my own eyes, which is the count I actually trust. I turned and I looked up my line. You can't always see everybody. That's the honest thing nobody tells you. Line's a couple hundred yards. It bends with the ground. There's brush and there's smoke drifting through in sheets. And a man crouched cutting is smaller than a man standing. So you don't count bodies like you'd count sheep in a field. You count by anchor points where you know a man should be, and you find the shape of him there, and you move to the next. I did that. I went up the line, position by position, and I found them. My Sawyer on the point, his swamper behind him hauling the cut brush clear, the two on the flank. On down. I found every one of them where he was supposed to be, and I counted, and I got 11. 11. My number. The right number. The one that walked in. And the relief that went through me, I remember the relief, physically, in my chest. Because that's the towel I keep coming back to. You don't feel relief over a slip of the tongue. You feel relief when some poport of you was afraid the answer would be different. I didn't examine that. I was working. There's a version of me that examined it, and that version doesn't exist. Because on a fire line, you don't get to sit with your feelings. You've got a saw team pushing ahead of your anchor, and you've got to move up or you'll leave a gap. So I filed it. Radio hiccup. Counted wrong on the key. Counted right with my eyes. 11. Move on. We worked the line up toward the ridge for the next 2 hours, and the fire behaved, which is not the same as the fire being safe. It just means it did what we expected, coming up the far slope steady. No wind to stand it up and throw it. Good work. Clean work. The kind of morning that if you'd stopped me at lunch and asked how it was going, I'd have said fine, easy. Holding. I'd have said, we're all good up here. 11 and holding. The second PAR came a little before 10, not from division this time from me. We'd had a spot, a little finger of fire that ember jumped across our line lower down and had to be knocked out fast before it got established behind us. And any time the fire gets on the wrong side of you, even for 2 minutes, even after you've killed it, you PAR your crew. That's not optional. That's the rule written in the blood of men who didn't do it. You put fire behind your people. You count your people. Every time. No exceptions. So I called it. Keyed up. All my positions. Give me a PAR. And this time I counted slow. This time I was awake. The spot fire had my adrenaline up, and I counted the way you count when it matters. Each man answering in order down the line. His identifier. His voice. And I brought it up in my head one at a time. Deliberate, no stacking, no rushing. 1, 2, 3. On down. 11, 12. There was a 12th. Not a doubled voice. Not 2 men keying at once. I was listening for exactly that this time. Listening hard. And it wasn't that. It was a clean acknowledgement on its own. In its own beat in the sequence. A position calling in the way a position calls in. And I counted it. And it made 12, and no part of the traffic explained it away. I keyed up, and I said hold, say again, and I ran it back. Called the positions over, and it came around clean again. 11 answers I could put a name and a face to, and one more. I stood there on the side of a mountain with a spot fire still smoking behind me, and my whole crew waiting on my next word, and I did the only thing the job allowed me to do. I could not stall the line over a number I couldn't explain. I could not tell 10 men to stop working and stand in place while their boss decided whether he could count. The fire doesn't wait for you to be sure. So I looked up my line one more time, fast, and I found 11 shapes where 11 shapes should be, and I told myself the radio was doing something in the terrain, bouncing, stacking, whatever it does, and I keyed up and I gave division my number. I said 11. Out loud, on the net, I said 11, all accounted for, resuming work, and nobody argued with me. That's the part I didn't understand yet. Nobody argued with me, because it would be days before I learned that when I said 11, I was already the only man on that mountain who thought the number was 11. There's a man on my crew named Delgado. Was that season you cycle through people. But Delgado had been with me 3 years by then, and I'd have put him up for squad boss the next season if things had gone differently. Steady, quiet, the kind who counts his own people without being told, which is the highest thing I can say about a firefighter. Around noon, we broke for a few minutes where the line leveled off, men dropping packs, pulling water, and I went and crouched next to him, and I asked him something I'd never once asked another human being in 15 years. I asked him how many of us were up here. I made it sound like nothing, made it sound like I was checking his head, the way a boss does, testing whether his people are tracking the crew the way they should. And Delgado didn't even look up from his water. He said the whole crew. And then, because I didn't move, because something in my crouching there made him think I wanted the actual number, he said 12. He said 12 like it was the sky being blue. I asked him who. I kept my voice flat, just a boss running his squad boss through the roster, and Delgado ran it. He named my Sawyer and the Swamper and the 2 on the flank, and on down, the same men I'd counted at 7 that morning, the same men I'd have pulled off this hill in an emergency in that exact order. He named 10, and then he named one more. He said a name I knew. That's the thing I can't make anyone understand who wasn't there. It wasn't a stranger's name. It wasn't some name that came out of the smoke. It was a name that belonged to fire, a name that fit, the kind of last name half the men out here have. And when Delgado said it, he said it easy, familiar, the way you say the name of a man you've been eating dust next to for a week. He didn't hesitate. He didn't reach for it. It was just there in the roster in his mouth, in its slot, between 2 men I knew were real. And I said, yeah, right, of course. And I stood up and walked a little way off and drank water I didn't taste, because here is what I could not do. I could not turn to Delgado steady, careful Delgado, the best man I had, and say I don't know who that is. I could not say there are 11 of us, and there have always been 11 of us, and you just put a 12th man on my crew, like you were reading it off a card. Because if I said that, one of 2 things was true. Either Delgado was wrong, and my best man had lost the count, which meant I couldn't trust the man I trusted most to keep his people alive. Or I was wrong, and I could not afford, 3 hours into a shift with fire still working up the slope, to be a crew boss who was wrong about how many men he had. So I did the coward's arithmetic. I decided it was Delgado. Just for now. Just until I could sort it. Delgado had gotten a name stuck in his head, maybe from another crew, maybe from a briefing. Some man who'd been assigned and then reassigned. Some paperwork ghost. A name that had floated over from a different unit and lodged in my squad boss's memory. That happens. Names travel on a fire. You hear so many of them. That held me together for about an hour. The trouble with deciding it's the other man is that you have to keep deciding it, over and over, against a rising pile of the other man being fine. Because Delgado was fine. All afternoon he was exactly the firefighter he'd always been. Sharp, tracking, calling his squad's positions clean, There was nothing wrong with Delgado. A man who's lost the count shows it in a dozen small ways he's slow to answer. He looks around too much. He double-checks. Delgado did none of that. Delgado was more sure of the 12 than I was of the 11. And that is a very hard thing to sit inside, watching your steadiest man be calm and certain about a number that's one more than the truth, and knowing that from where he stands, I'm the one who looks like I've lost something. The next PAR I want to tell you about carefully, because it's the one where I stopped being able to lie to myself about the radio. Mid-afternoon. The fire had picked up a little as the day heated, the way it does, and we'd moved up near the ridge to tie in with the crew working the next division over. Division called a PAR all divisions, all crews, the big one. The one where everybody reports, and the numbers stack up into a total that command writes down and stares at. Because that total is every human being on the mountain, and it has to be right. And I'd had all afternoon to get ready for this one. I'd decided how I was going to beat it. I was going to count with my eyes only. Forget the radio entirely. When the PAR came to me, I would not count acknowledgments at all. I would look up my line, find 11 bodies, and report what I saw, not what I heard. Eyes don't stack. Eyes don't bounce off terrain. A man is standing there, or he isn't. So the PAR came around, and I turned, and I counted my line, slow, careful, in the flat gold light of the afternoon, with the smoke thinner than it had been. Anchor point to anchor point. And I found them. My Sawyer, his swamper, the flank. On down the ground I'd walked all day. I found 11 men, and I found them well. Saw them clear. Saw boots and helmets and the shapes of them bent to the work. No guessing. No shapes in the smoke. 11. And while I was counting them with my eyes, the radio was going. The other crews reporting in. And somewhere in that traffic, in the ordinary stack of numbers going up to command, I heard our division's total come across. It was one high. Every crew on our division reported, and the numbers added up, and the total that went to command and got written down was one more than the number of people standing on that division of the mountain. And nobody keyed up to fix it. Nobody said, "Hold, that's wrong. Recount." The total went up. Command acknowledged it, and the fire kept burning, and the men kept working, and the number that was now the official truth of how many souls were on that ground was wrong by 1, and I was the only person on the entire net who seemed to know it. I sat with my eyes on 11 men and my ears on a total that said 12, and I understood, finally, that it was not the radio. You cannot bounce a wrong total off a hillside. A total is arithmetic. 12 men's worth of arithmetic had gone up to command and been believed, and only 11 men were breathing on my line. I could have keyed up. I want you to know I thought about it, standing there. I could have said, "Command, my count is 11. Your division total is high. Recount." 6 words. That's all it would have taken to make it real, to drag it out of my head and into the open where other men would have to look at it. And I didn't. I've thought about why more than I've thought about anything else in my life. And the truth, the ugly truth, is that I was afraid of what recount would find. Because if command called a recount, and the number came back 12, if every other boss counted his people, and it added up to 12, and I was the only one holding at 11, then it wasn't the mountain that was wrong. It was me. In front of command, on the open net with my name on it, the man who's never lost a count would be the one man who couldn't count. 15 seasons. The one thing I'm known for. I would rather have let a wrong number stand than find out it was mine. So I keyed up when the PAR came to me and I said 11, all accounted for, and my 11 went into a total that came out 12, and I told myself I'd sort it later, off the line, where it was safe. That's the moment, if you want to know. Not the first 12 at 8 in the morning, not Delgado's easy roster at noon. This one. The moment I chose the number that let me keep being who I was over the number I could see with my own eyes. Because after that, every count I made was a lie I was telling to protect the last thing I had. And I knew it. And I kept doing it. Because the fire doesn't wait. And the work has to be done. And the only thing worse than being wrong is everyone finding out. We worked until dark, tied in with the next division, held the ridge, watched the fire lay back down in the cool. Good shift, a shift you'd write up as a win. Walking down in the last light, boots loud on the rock. I did the count one more time out of habit, the way you always do coming off the hill, because coming down is when you're supposed to have everyone. And I counted the men in front of me on the trail, dark shapes strung out down the ridge, and I got to the bottom of the line and I couldn't make it come out. I counted 11, I counted 12, I counted 11 again. The shapes kept moving and folding into each other in the dark, and I could not, walking down off my own mountain at the end of my own shift, tell you for certain how many men I was bringing down. 15 seasons. I had never not known. I told my wife that night that I thought I was getting sick. That's the closest I came, that first day, to saying it out loud to anyone. I'm coming down with something, I said. I keep losing track of things. And she felt my forehead and said I was warm from the sun and told me to drink water and sleep. And I lay in the dark next to her, doing the only thing I knew how to do, which was count. Not sheep. My crew. I lay there and ran the roster the way Delgado had run it, and I got to 10 men and my own name, and that was 11. Clean. Certain. And I thought, there, you idiot. You were tired. It was the smoke and the long day. 11. You know your crew. And then some part of my mind, unbidden, slid a 12th name into the slot. The name Delgado had said. It fit itself in there smooth, between 2 men I knew were real, and it sat there like it had always been there. And the worst part, the part that had me sitting up in the dark, with my heart going, was that I couldn't feel the seam. I couldn't feel where the real name stopped and the added one began. It was just a roster, 12 names, all of them equally solid, and I could not for the life of me point to the one that was a lie. That's when it stopped being about the mountain. You understand? Up there, I could blame the radio, the smoke, the terrain, Delgado's memory. In my own bed, in the dark, with nothing but my own head, I ran the count, and my own head gave me 12. The thing had gotten off the hill. It had come home in my skull. I went back up the next morning anyway. You don't call in sick from a fire because you can't count. There's no line on the form for that. Second day, the crew was the crew. My sawyer griped about his saw. The one who talks too much talked too much. The one with the bad knee took the downhill slow. 10 men I knew, doing the 10 things 10 men do. And I moved among them all morning, cutting line, and I watched them the way you'd watch your own hands if you'd started to suspect them. And I want to tell you something that took me most of that second day to admit, because it's the center of the whole thing, and I fought it hard. They were all fine, every one of them. There was no gap. There was no man being covered for, no absence somebody was papering over. 11 men were doing the work of 11 men, and doing it well, and the crew ran 12, and both of those things were true at once, and neither one strained. Nobody was doing double work. Nobody was short-handed. The line got cut at the pace a full crew cuts line, and everyone got water breaks, and every position was manned, And it just balanced at a number one higher than the number of people I could touch. That's the thing that broke something in me. Not a phantom. Not an empty spot at the fire's edge, where a man should be and wasn't. The opposite. A crew that was complete. A crew that was, if anything, running easier than a crew of 10 men and a boss should run. Everything a little more covered, a little more manned. The work distributing itself across a body count that came out one too many, no matter how I counted it. The system was not missing anyone. The system had one extra, and it had absorbed him so completely that the only friction in the entire operation was inside one man's head. Mine. I stopped trying to find him after that. This is the shift I need you to follow because it's the second day's whole lesson, and it's the thing that finally turned the fear all the way around. I'd spent the first day hunting the 12th man, scanning the line, listening for the extra voice, waiting to catch the moment the count went wrong so I could point at it. And on the second day, I understood there was nothing to catch. There was no moment. The count didn't go wrong. It was wrong. Smoothly. From the top. Everywhere. Agreed. I wasn't going to find a 12th man standing in the smoke because the 12th man wasn't the problem to solve. The problem to solve was why I was the only one who thought there were 11. And once you ask it that way, it turns and looks back at you. Because think about it, the way I was finally forced to think about it. Sitting on a rock at lunch, on the second day, with a sandwich I couldn't eat. Every other man on that mountain, my whole crew, the next division, command with their written total, every one of them said 12. Delgado said 12 without a flicker. The arithmetic said 12. The one and only source in the entire world that said 11 was me. My eyes, my memory, my count. The instrument I'd trusted for 15 years above every other instrument on the fire. So which is more likely? That every man, every count, every total, the whole system of accountability that hundreds of lives depend on, and that works, that has always worked, that all of it was wrong, the same way at the same time by one. Or that one man, tired, 2 days deep, running on adrenaline and bad sleep, had a number stuck in his head from some earlier season, some earlier crew of 11, and was holding on to it against all the evidence, because letting go of it meant admitting he was the thing that had failed. Written down like that, there's no contest. Any honest man reads that and knows which one is more likely. I knew which one was more likely. I just couldn't make myself believe the likely thing, because the likely thing was that I was the broken instrument. That somewhere in 15 seasons the count had finally slipped, not out there on the line where I could catch it, but in here, in the one place I couldn't check it against anything, because the thing doing the checking was the thing that was broken. I went to Delgado again in the afternoon. I couldn't help it. I framed it careful, casual, said something about how the crew was gelling. Good group this year. And then I asked him, and I hated myself for the smallness of it. For how much I needed the answer, I asked him if he remembered when the 12th guy joined us. Which briefing? Which day? And Delgado thought about it. He actually thought about it, squinting off at the ridge, the way you do when someone asks you a real question about a real thing. And then he said he'd always been with us. Start of the assignment. Hiked in day 1 with the rest. Day 1. When I counted 11 at the trailhead and wrote 11 in my own head. And knew that 11 was what walked in. I said, right, yeah, day 1. And I walked away. And I understood that there was no bottom to this. There was no earlier point I could reach back to where the number had been clean, and I could prove it. Delgado's memory went all the way back to the trailhead and put 12 men on it. If I'd asked command to pull the sign in, the manifest, the crew roster from day 1, and I want you to hear that I thought about it. I thought hard about finding some piece of paper, some record outside my own head, that I could hold up and say, look, 11. It says 11 if I'd done that. I already knew, with a certainty that sat in my stomach like a stone, what the paper would say. It would say 12. Of course it would. Everything said 12. The paper would have 12 names on it, and one of them would be the name Delgado said, in somebody's handwriting, signed in, checked off, real as the rest. And then I'd have nothing. Not even the small, dark comfort of a mountain that was lying to me. I'd have a written record agreeing with every man on the fire, and a memory of 11 that lived nowhere but in my own head, and no way left to tell whether that memory was the last true thing I had, or the first sign of how far I'd already gone. So I didn't pull the paper. I stayed on the line, where at least I couldn't be proven wrong. We worked the second day out and the fire gave ground, and it was a good shift again. And coming down in the dark, I did the thing you do, the count. And this time, I didn't even fight it. I let the shapes on the trail be however many they wanted to be. I brought my crew down off the mountain, and I could not have told you, under oath, how many of them there were, and every single one of them made it to the bottom. And that's the part that still wakes me up. Not that I lost count. That I lost count, and nobody was missing. The third day was the day I decided to force it. I'd spent 2 nights not sleeping, running the count in the dark, and I'd come to a place where I couldn't live in the not knowing anymore. I needed the number dragged out of my head and into the open, where it could be settled one way or the other. If I was the broken one, fine. I'd rather know I was broken than spend another shift as the only man on a mountain who couldn't trust his own eyes. And if I wasn't, if there really were only 11, and the whole fire was somehow carrying a 12th that didn't exist, then I needed that in the open too, because that was a thing that could get a man killed, and getting men killed is the one thing I will not do. So I built a trap. That's how I thought of it. A count the mountain couldn't cheat. Here's what I'd figured out, lying awake. Every count so far had a hole in it that let the 12th slip through. The radio could stack voices. My eyes could lose a man in smoke. Delgado's memory could be wrong. Each channel had a weakness, and the 12th lived in the weaknesses. So I would build a count with no weakness. I would put my men where I could see all of them at once, in the open, no smoke, close enough to touch, and I would count them with my eyes and my ears and my hands at the same time, and I would make the number be a number. We got our chance mid-morning. The fire had laid down enough that division pulled us back to a safety zone. A burned-out meadow, black and open, the kind of ground fire's already been through, so it can't come again. Wide open. No smoke to speak of. And I did something a boss is allowed to do when he's staging his crew. I lined them up, called them into the black, single file, spaced an arm's length apart, facing me, for a gear check. Perfectly ordinary. Nobody thought twice. And I stood in front of my crew in an open black meadow in full daylight, with nothing between me and any of them. And I counted. I counted with my finger this time, pointed at each man out loud, 1 through however many, touching each one with my eyes and my voice at once. No radio, no smoke, no memory, just bodies in a line in the sun. 1, 2, 3, down the line. My Sawyer, the talker, the bad knee, Delgado, on down. 11. I counted 11 men, and I stood there with my hand still up, pointing at the end of the line, at the empty air past the last man, and the relief came up in me so hard I almost sat down in the ash. 11. There it was. In the black, in the sun, no way to hide. 11 men. I was right. I'd been right the whole time. My eyes were good. The count was good. Whatever had been wrong was in the radio, and the smoke, and one bad name in Delgado's head. And here in the clean daylight, the truth was 11, and I could finally let go of the stone in my stomach. And then Delgado, standing there in the line where I'd pointed at him and counted him, said, quiet, just to me, "Boss, you skipped one." I said, "What?" He said, "You skipped a man. Count again." And the whole crew was looking at me now, because a boss who miscounts his lined-up crew in a safety zone is a boss with a problem. And I felt every one of them watching, and I counted again, slower, pointing, out loud. Down the line I could see all of every man an arm's length from the next, nowhere for anyone to hide. And this time I got 12. I don't know how to make you understand this, so I'm just going to tell it flat. The line didn't change. Nobody stepped into it. No man appeared. The same crew stood in the same black meadow in the same sun, and I pointed my finger and moved my mouth, and the first time the line ended at 11, and the second time the same line, unchanged, ended at 12. Same men, same spacing, same daylight. I did not add a person. I counted the identical row of human beings twice in 90 seconds and got 2 different numbers, and the second number was the one Delgado nodded at. And the crew relaxed, because 12 was right. 12 was the count. The boss had just miscounted the first time the way tired men do. I had built a count with no weakness, and the number had still moved. That's when it stopped being about the radio or the smoke or Delgado's memory. Those were all channels outside me, and I'd closed every one of them, and the number moved anyway, which meant the weakness the 12th was living in wasn't in any of the channels. It was in me, the counting instrument itself, the thing I'd trusted above everything for 15 years. I had put my crew in a line in the sun specifically so that nothing between me and the truth could lie to me. And I'd learned the one thing worse than a lying mountain. The mountain wasn't lying. The count came out of me, and I could make the same 11 men be 11 or be 12 depending on nothing I could feel or control, and there was no longer any instrument left in the world I could check myself against. Not the radio, not my eyes, not my crew, not paper. All of them said 12, and the one that said 11 was the same one that, 90 seconds later, said 12, using the same eyes, on the same men. I stood in that meadow, and I felt the last solid thing go out from under me. It wasn't fear, the way a fire is fear, hot and fast. It was the quiet kind. The kind where you realize the floor you've been standing on your whole life was never a floor. It was just a habit of not falling, and now you've noticed, and you can't unnotice. For 15 seasons, I hadn't lost a man because I could count. That was the deal I'd made with the mountain. I keep the number, and the number keeps them alive. And standing in the black, I understood the deal had never been what I thought it was. I hadn't been keeping the number. I'd been getting lucky, shift after shift, year after year, that the number in my head happened to match the men on the ground. And the luck had run out. Not in some dramatic way, not with a man burning, but like this, with a crew that was perfectly safe and a boss who could no longer produce the same answer twice about how many of them there were. Delgado was still watching me, careful, the way you watch a man you're starting to worry about. And I saw myself in his face, saw what I'd been seeing in him for 2 days, except now it was pointed the other way. 2 days ago, I'd looked at Delgado and thought, gently, that maybe my best man was losing it. And now my best man was looking at me and thinking the same thing, and being kind about it, and being right. We finished the gear check. I gave the order to move back up to the line, and as they filed out of the meadow, one at a time, past me, I counted them going by, because I couldn't not. And I got a number, and I want to tell you what it was. But the truth is, I've never been sure. I counted them out of the black, and up toward the fire, and the number I got was just a number my mouth made. I'd stopped believing it before it was even finished. The fire was picking up again on the far slope. There was work to do, and the work, at least, didn't care how many of us there were. The work just needed doing, and we did it. And I called the positions, and moved the line, and did every single thing a good crew boss does, flawlessly, all afternoon, while the man doing it had quietly stopped being able to do the one thing the whole job stood on. The fire made its run late in the afternoon, the way they do when the day has been too quiet. The wind came up over the ridge the way it hadn't all week, and the fire that had been laying back on the far slope stood up and started to move. And the good easy shift turned in about 10 minutes into the other kind. Division came over the net fast, pulling crews back off the exposed ground, and my piece of the line went from holding to get your people out, and everything I am, everything 15 seasons built, took over and did the job, while the man inside me stood off to the side and watched. I pulled my crew off the ridge, called the positions, moved them down and back toward the black we'd staged in that morning, the burned meadow that couldn't burn again, the one safe piece of ground on the whole mountain. That's the drill. When the fire runs, you go to the black, and I ran my crew into it the way you're supposed to. Last man in behind me, everyone accounted for, and I stood at the edge of the black, with the fire throwing heat across the drainage, and I did the only thing left to do. I counted them, because that's what the black is for. You get your people into the safe ground, and you count them. And the count is the whole reason the black exists. The count is the thing that tells you the fire didn't take anyone on the way down. Every man who's ever died in a burnover. Some boss stood in the black afterward and counted and came up short. And that short number is the worst sound in the world. So you count. You count in the black, or the black means nothing. And Division was calling for it. All crews. PAR. All crews report the big count. Everybody at once. Command with the pencil. The total that was every soul on the mountain. I stood in the black with my crew around me. Close. No smoke now because we were in it and past it. The fire's roar loud across the gap. But my men right there, gathered in tight the way men gather when the fire's up. And I counted them. I counted 11. And I stood there with the number in my mouth and the radio waiting, and I understood that this was the count that had been coming for 3 days. Not a formality at 8 in the morning, not a trap in an empty meadow. This one, the one that mattered. The fire had run, and I had my people in the black, and command needed to know they were all there, and the number in my head was 11. And I no longer had the first idea whether 11 meant they were all safe, or meant I'd lost one on the way down and couldn't feel the whole. Because that was the thing, standing there. If the true number was 12, if there'd been 12 all along, and I was the broken counter, then 11 meant a man was missing. 11 meant I'd left someone up on that ridge in the fire, and my broken head was telling me everyone was fine. And if the true number was 11, if I'd been right the whole time, then 11 meant they were all here, all safe, and the 12th had never been anything but a ghost in everyone else's counting. I could not tell which, standing in the black with my own crew an arm's length away. I could not tell whether the number in my mouth meant they were saved or meant I'd killed a man. And there was no instrument left to ask. Not the radio, not my eyes, not Delgado, who was standing right there watching me with the fire in his face, waiting for his boss to make the count. All of them said 12, and I said 11. and one of those numbers meant somebody was still on the ridge. The net was waiting. Command was waiting. Division said again, "Sharper all crews, PAR report." And every second I didn't answer was a second command, didn't know if my people were safe. And in that silence, a boss who won't produce a count is a boss who's lost one. And they'll send men back up into a running fire to look for a man who might not exist, might never have existed. And men die going back up. I had to say a number. There was no version of the next 10 seconds where I got to be uncertain. The job doesn't allow it. You say the number or men go back into the fire. So I keyed up, and I want to tell you I said 11. I want to tell you I held to the last true thing I had, my own count, 15 seasons, the number my eyes gave me in the black. But I'd counted 11 men in that same meadow that same morning, and then counted 12. Same men, same ground, 90 seconds apart. My 11 wasn't worth anything anymore. My 11 might be a dead man I couldn't feel. I keyed up, and I gave them the number that was safe, the number that matched, the number every other man and every other count and the whole system agreed on, so that no one would go back up, so that command would write it down and stand down the search, so that I would not be the one boss on the mountain whose count came up short in a burnover. I said 12. I said all accounted for, 12 in the black, and command acknowledged it, and the total went up right, and nobody went back up the ridge, and the fire burned itself out against the black through the evening, and every man I could see walked off that mountain alive. 12 of them, or 11. I gave the number that let everyone go home, and I will never know, as long as I live, whether it was the truth or whether I stood in the black and reported a dead man as present because I couldn't bear to be the one who was wrong. That's the part that doesn't heal, not the extra man. I've made a kind of peace with the extra man. He's a name I'll carry, a slot in a roster I can't empty. It's the other thing. It's that when it finally mattered, when the count was the only thing standing between a man and the fire, I didn't give the number I'd counted. I gave the number everyone else believed. 15 seasons of being the man they trusted with the count. And in the one moment it was ever really for, I let the count be whatever kept me from being wrong. I still work fire. That surprises people when I tell them any of this, which is almost never. But I do. I go up the hill and I cut line, and I keep my crew, and I call the PARs, and I say the numbers into the radio clean and calm the way I always have, and no one who works under me would ever guess. But I don't trust the number anymore. I say it, and command writes it down, and men rest their lives on it. And inside I don't believe it, any of it, ever. I count my crew in the black, and I get a number, and it's just a sound my mouth makes. Somewhere on a mountain 3 years ago, I stopped being the man who never lost a man, and became a man who says a number he doesn't believe, and lets other people call it the truth. Every head count comes back clean now, every single one. I make sure of it. I just don't know anymore how many men I'm bringing down.